Welcome to the Kyero.com Spanish Property Podcast, where we interview people who recently purchased a home in Spain. They tell us what worked, what didn't, and what they'd do differently next time. I'm Beth Davison, and today I'm speaking with George, a retired music teacher from Southampton. After spending thousands of hours researching, George whittled his shortlist down from over 200 properties. And just wait until you hear about how the one he settled on helps inspire his creativity. He worked with estate agent Home España to find his dream home in Spain. Check out the show notes at kyero.com/podcast to find links and resources mentioned in this episode.
My name's George. I come from Southampton in England, where up until last year I was a piano teacher. And then I retired in the summer and decided I wanted to live in Spain. And I've bought a house near Valencia, just inland of the city, on the edge of some mountains. And I'm rather settled.
Lovely. So was it a long-term kind of dream?
Yes. I have been planning this, if you like, thinking about it probably for the last 7 or 8 years, most of which meant spending hours and hours and hours on the internet looking at houses, looking at websites that tell you how to move to Spain and what to do and what not to do. And it all boiled down to coming out around about a year ago, actually, to look at a few properties and picking one.
Lovely.
And that was that.
I love that it was years and years in the making. So what was it, other than retirement? Obviously, that made it the perfect time. But what was it that you think made you go, yeah, that's the one? Yeah,
well, retirement obviously was the big thing. I wanted... The way I look at it, I didn't sort of so much retire as to give up teaching. And I came here to do other things, mainly compose and arrange music. And I wanted somewhere nice to be able to do that. I like the idea, I've been to Spain many times, and I like the idea of having somewhere that's got winter sun and winter sunshine, literally. Obviously, Spain does and Southampton doesn't. In fact, even at the moment, we are in March, and my old house is under that 2 feet of snow, apparently.
Yes. Yeah, it's not a great time.
It's not a fit. And I decided to come to this area because I actually like Valencia as a city. And from a driving point of view, I'm only about 4 hours from France, and therefore the rest of Europe. And I like driving quite a lot. I've got a small van. So, I found I could have gone down to the deep south of Spain where it's even sunnier. It just takes a whole day and more to get back out to the country again, whereas from here I can be back in France, in half a day.
Great. And
so here I am.
Was it always going to be a permanent thing for you? Were you thinking at one point it was going to be a holiday home and then you decided to relocate permanently, or was it always going to be a relocation?
It was always going to be a relocation. Except that didn't mean that I won't ever go back to the UK. I expect as old age beckons, that's something I'll probably have to do. But no, this was a complete relocation, giving up living in England. Personally, I was extremely disappointed by the Brexit vote a couple of years ago, so that just helped cement things even more, I suppose. So no, it's a permanent thing.
And just speaking of Brexit, it's one thing that we haven't touched on much actually in these podcasts, but that obviously encouraged you to leave the UK, but did it make things more difficult from a kind of legal standpoint? How did that affect the buying process?
No, it didn't affect the buying process because technically, legally, in all sorts of ways, we are still in Europe. So European citizens, UK citizens in Europe still have exactly the same rights. What has always been an unknown factor is how those rights might change when Brexit takes place. And I took a gamble, I suppose, that Spain wouldn't want to suddenly chuck out all of its British citizens. They've made lots of announcements to the effect that they wouldn't do that. And I believe as of yesterday, the UK and the EU came to some sort of agreement over citizens' rights anyway. So I think the gamble has more or less paid off.
And it's interesting that it's all we're still sort of waiting to see the chips aren't down yet, kind of finally, but it's interesting that it didn't have any effect on your decision to leave.
No, other than to make it stronger.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that.
I'm quite a European person by nature. My father was French, my grandparents are Ukrainian. I feel very European. I love living over here. I've worked in Europe. I've worked in Germany before. I just love the idea of being on mainland Europe. Living here didn't pose any kind of cultural problem for me at all. And from a retired person's point of view, on a reduced income, Spain and other countries, but for me, Spain is a much better financial prospect. I can afford to live much better here than I could have done in the UK.
Okay, great. So it's kind of a better quality of life.
Oh, very much so. The quality of life. I eat better food. I have a bigger house than I could have afforded in England. There are very few downsides to it, to be quite honest. Apart from being away from family and friends, but to be honest, they come over every sort of 8 weeks or so. There's always somebody here. I've got 2 daughters with families, and there's always somebody around the house.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about the property, because obviously it's big enough then to have visitors. What was it that you went for specifically?
I wanted a property that had space all around it. I wanted at least 3 or 4 bedrooms, to accommodate people. And the house I ended up with, well, I suppose technically it's a bungalow. Has 3 bedrooms, but it's got further rooms, if you like, outside of the main building. It can accommodate quite a few people, actually. And there's parking for about 6 or 7 cars off the road. And I'm in a cul-de-sac anyway, so it's a quiet area. And there's absolutely no trouble even if 8 or 10 people want to come down.
Great.
And here there's a pool, so that's quite a draw for the family.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have an orchard. I've got a garden that wraps itself all the way around the house. It keeps me busy, but it's spacious. And a house of this size would have been 4 or 5 times the cost anywhere in England.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to budget, did you know how much you wanted to spend? Did you go over that? Did you manage to go under it? How did it all work for you?
Yeah, I worked out very, very clearly what I would spend on a house and what I would spend if I needed to do it up afterwards. So I had a very strict budget for that, and that had to take into account all the fees you pay when you buy a property here. You pay taxes, you pay quite a lot actually to estate agents compared to England. So you have to take all these things into account. So I had a budget, and I ended up with a house that actually worked out quite a lot under my budget, which means I've been able to spend quite a bit of money doing it up here and there, and have plenty left over. But I thought it was really important to work to a strict budget. I knew what I could afford, and I stuck to it.
Do you mind me asking how much you spent?
Yes, the house itself cost €110,000. And by the time you added in all the other fees that go with purchasing a house, legal fees and things like that, and then local taxes, that brought it up to about €130,000. So at the exchange rate that I got, that worked out roughly actually about £110,000.
Right, which just seems such good value for the size that you've got.
Oh, it's fantastic. This house is 2 times, at least twice as big as my old house. I've got a huge garden, I've got the orchard, I've got a pool, I've got outhouses, I've got a building that can convert into a bungalow in the garden. It's already got a 1 room and a built-in shower room next to it. And you couldn't get anything like that, really, in the south of England where I come from.
Yeah.
I used to work in the New Forest, and it's a very, very expensive area. So in a way, I hate to use the phrase, but it's almost a no-brainer. The cost of living here is much, much cheaper. Council tax is cheaper, road tax is cheaper, food is cheaper. So, in terms of money, the budget is important. It's worked out so far pretty well.
Yeah, it sounds it. And was this the only place you viewed? Did you go on lots of other viewings after you'd done all your kind of online research when you first headed to Spain? What kind of process did you go through?
Well, now, for the last 2 or 3 years, really, I was looking at scores and scores and scores of houses. I would do searches on your website, putting in the amount that I was prepared to pay and the kind of property that I wanted. And at one stage, I must have had a short list of probably 200 houses from all the thousands that I'd looked at. And then I whittled that down and down and down and down. And then a year ago, I put together a list of about a dozen. And they happened to be, it was just one of those things, they all happened to be near Valencia. So I came over here with a view to seeing them all, which I did. And while I was here, I was introduced to this house, which actually wasn't on my list, partly because it had been way above the budget. But while I was staying in my hotel here, the owner reduced the price because he hadn't been able to sell it. It brought it into my budget, and my estate agent brought it to my attention, and they drove me out here. And it was sort of love at first sight, really. So it wasn't even a house I had on my sights.
No, but it's lovely if the price gets lowered. That's perfect.
Yes, I was very lucky in that respect. But some of the other houses I saw within my budget were all perfectly acceptable. So I ended up having quite a nice choice. But this one happens to overlook some mountains. The room that I'm sitting in now has 3 big picture windows that look over a range of mountains. And there's nothing between me and those mountains, and nothing can be built because it's protected land. So it had a view, and I always had in mind that there's nothing as precious as a good view in a house. And that was quite a big part of my thinking. Whenever I saw houses, I looked to see what was around them. And the ones that had views sort of moved up my list, as it were.
Yeah, fantastic. And have you felt that it does help with your creativity, with your composing and stuff? Does the view make all the difference?
Well, something makes a difference. It might be weather as well. But since I came here last year, I have, and it might be because when I was working, I was very busy. I was working 7 days a week, in fact. But I have felt a lot more creative. I've been writing, arranging music a lot better, a lot more quickly than I used to. And helping some of my old pupils with compositions of theirs as well. They still keep in touch. So I think that's just general contentment. But of course, the view and the weather and the fact that I've got sort of fruit trees all over the place, things that I couldn't have in England. I'm sure that's all part and parcel of it.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the Spanish music scene? Is there kind of musical stuff going on where you live? Do you get involved at all in the Spanish side of that?
Well, I haven't yet, but there certainly is. The 2 nearest towns to me, and I'm roughly equidistant between them, both have music festivals every year that last a week. And one of them, in fact, is quite a big festival. It attracts people from all over Europe. And then there's Valencia itself, which is a very cultural city, has an opera house and theatres. In fact, you've only got to step onto the metro in Valencia, and there's piped music. When I was here last year looking around, you couldn't go anywhere without listening to The Marriage of Figaro or Don Giovanni on the metro loudspeakers. So, driving into the city with Mozart was rather nice.
Well, it does sound like you're in the perfect place, that it's kind of all matched up really well. You mentioned your agent briefly. So who was it that you went through and what was that process like?
The agent that had this house was Home España, who have an office in Valencia, and I think down in Alicante as well, but they've got a local one. And I was shown around. And the moment, really, that I said, yes, I'll have it, and things swung into action, they were not only professional, but extremely quick as well. And they eased me through the situation very smoothly, quickly, politely, professionally. I couldn't really say anything bad about them. I'd looked on the internet to see about getting a lawyer in Valencia, and I chose a chap who in fact, an Irish lawyer, who is the honorary consul for the British Embassy here. And when Home España said, we'll take you around to see a lawyer, I'd been warned off all sorts of websites used to say, don't let your estate agent take you to a lawyer. And the one they took me to was the chap that I had sorted out, funnily enough. And I've been perfectly happy with him. He's done a very, very good job here. So they were absolutely superb, and they have been all along.
I'm glad it's been such a positive experience. It sounds like it's all worked really well. Have there been any parts that you have found challenging?
Yes. One thing I wasn't quite prepared for, I have to say, I bought the house fully furnished. And here's a warning for English people. In Spain, it seems that fully furnished means that when they leave, they just walk out.
Oh, okay.
Because I came here with all my belongings, and the house was full of their belongings. And it actually took me quite a few weeks to get rid of every pot, can, all their children's exercise books from 20 years ago. I mean, everything that you could possibly leave in a house, apart from your clothes, and even in fact there were some clothes as well. But everything else was just left. And there was quite a lot of clearing up to do, as you can imagine.
Yeah, totally.
But I've heard other people say exactly the same. So it seems to be the thing in Spain that when you leave your house, if you're selling it fully furnished, that they do mean plus everything else.
Interesting. Okay, that's a great tip.
And I think nothing compared to living in England, it doesn't. One thing living in England doesn't prepare you for here is just how bureaucratic Spain is. There is a lot of paperwork. There are lots of different taxes to pay. And that usually involves going to an office somewhere, going to your town hall. You can't do as many things online as we can in the UK, so you just have to get used to getting embroiled in all this officialdom, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just a bit of a shock to the system, I suppose, when you get here.
Yeah, and different to the UK, but completely worth it in your case. It sounds like it's been a great experience.
Oh, gosh, yes. Oh, it's all part of the experience. I mean, everybody you meet friendly, and around here they don't speak any English. This is not a resort area. This is inland. So I have to use sign language half the time whilst I'm learning Spanish. But they all try to be as helpful as possible. So it's all part of the lovely experience. And it's a very civilised country. It's a lovely place to live.
Fantastic. Well, that is the end of my questions. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. I'm glad that it's been such a great experience for you and that it's going to continue to be for years to come by the sounds of it.
Well, I certainly hope so. I feel very settled here. I'm in no hurry to go back, I can tell you.
Yeah, especially not when it's snowing. Stay over there. Cheers, George. That's perfect.
That's right.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. And thanks to George for sharing his experiences, along with Home España for their help to make this episode possible. I particularly like the sound of how much further George's money can go now that he's relocated to Spain, and how much the surrounding countryside can inspire his music. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. This podcast is produced by Kyero.com, and our mission is to connect you with estate agents and properties throughout Spain. Whether your dream home is a rustic farmhouse surrounded by olive groves or a lock-up and leave apartment on the seafront, you'll find everything you need at Kyero.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate your 5-star rating on iTunes. It helps us reach and connect more people with their dream home in Spain. And whenever you're ready, here are 4 ways we can help you. Ask a question by emailing beth@kyero.com. We'll try and answer them all in an upcoming Q&A episode. Get a location guide also by emailing beth@kyero.com. We'll reply with the latest data and information on the areas you're interested in. Calculate your budget. Simply visit kyero.com/budget, enter 2 numbers, and you're done. Be our guest. If you've already purchased your home in Spain, we would love you to share your story on the podcast. Just email beth@kyero.com and we'll take it from there. Tune in next week when I speak with Catherine from Cork. She purchased a house in Olvera after experiencing what she describes as real Spain for her brother's wedding. Just one picture in a property magazine inspired a big change. I'm Beth Davison, and you've been listening to the Kyero.com Spanish Property Podcast. I'll see you next week.